So, moving on with another horror comic review, I'm going to be talking about Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Now, I've talked about this comic before, and it's probably one of my favorite crossovers, with good reason. This literally takes three of the greatest horror icons and puts them together to create one of the coolest, probably one of the coolest and goriest comics I've read in a long time. Now, Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash is actually kind of based off the unwritten script of where Fox actually wanted to do a second Freddy vs. Jason film and have Ash in the middle of it. But something happened. It was kind of a mix of a studio. Some people said it was Bruce Campbell who didn't want to do it. We don't necessarily know the details. However, this is, like I said, this is actually based off of mostly based off the unwritten script for Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, and in here, this is a lot of fun. Dynamite and Wildstorm teamed. Yeah, Wildstorm owned the comic book rights to do horror comics centered around, Freddy, Jason, Leatherface, and all that. They actually did a Chucky and Hackslash crossover, actually. Anyway, so moving right along. In here, what was I saying? Yeah, in here, this takes place actually in canon with the events of Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah, this, like I said, this is the unwritten sequel, the comic book sequel, I should say. And like I said, this is actually in canon after Freddy vs. Jason. So this comic takes place shortly after the events of Freddy vs. Jason, and Will and Laurie, who look nothing like the movie Will and Laurie, although I will admit they do look younger. Yeah, that was one thing I never got in the film. Yeah, why was it that, that's what, Freddy vs. Jason has a lot of flaws, and I openly admit I still love that film, for all the wrong reasons. But I will say this, one of the major gripes is that all the actors are well into their 20s, and they're all playing like they're 14. They even say, yeah, we go to high school, and the main character's 14, even though she looks like she's almost 30. Yeah. Seriously? You would have bought me over if you said college. Anyway. So yeah, also I guess they didn't get because again, they don't look anything like Will and Laurie from the film. Also, fun fact, if you don't know, Will was played by Jason Ritter, who most of you guys would know best as the voice of Dipper Pines. So when you go back and watch that film, you're just going to be thinking of Dipper fighting Freddy and Jason. You're welcome. Yeah. So yeah, Will and Laurie go back to Camp Crystal Lake to see if Freddy and Jason have died. However, they should have stayed out because Jason brutally kills them. However, so it turns out that after the events of Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy is now trapped inside Jason's head, and he's trying to get Jason to be his slave to find a thing called the Necronomicon. Now, why would he know about the Necronomicon? Simple. It's in Jason's house. It's in Jason's old house. And that's in canon, technically speaking. Yeah, for those who are unaware, in Jason's Dead, Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Yeah, in Jason Goes to Hell, there's a cameo scene of the Necronomicon in the movie. So I thought that was hilarious. In the actual comic, they're referencing just a fun little cameo they had in the story, in the movie. I thought that, Final Friday sucks. It's not a great film. But I thought that was really cool of how they referenced a fun little cameo and made it an important part of the story. We don't know how it's there, but it is kind of referenced in canon in this comic that they do refer to Jason is that he is a type of Deadite. Yeah, that's right. They make Jason a Deadite in here, which I can actually buy because that really explains how well he keeps coming back no matter what happens to him. So I'm really willing to accept that. Anyway, so Crystal Lake is kind of going over a major repair because they don't want to be associated with the town that has one of the greatest slashers of all time, and they're building an S-Mart there. Well, the new manager they've hired is to help get the shop running. Can't talk. Is Ash. Yeah, Ash is there. He's working back at S-Mart, and we run into everyone who is part of the comic, who I've literally forgotten their names because, let's face it, everyone outside of Ash is cannon fodder. So Jason is going around, and actually there's a great scene in the S-Mart where Jason walks into the S-Mart, and there are some brutal kills in this comic. There are some seriously, especially in that scene where he's just brutally murdering just people left and right. But yeah, Ash quickly discovers, about Freddy and Jason, and he has to keep the Necronomicon away from Freddy, because Freddy intends to not only use it to resurrect himself, but also amplify his powers. So I think that's really cool that, Freddy, once again, being the horrible bastard that he is, yeah, he's basically, pulled all the strings, and now he wants to use the Necronomicon to basically make the whole planet a nightmare, more or less. He wants to make a giant nightmare planet. The comic continues onward, and throughout the story, we follow, Ash's battles against Freddy and Jason, and there are some great scenes in here where, Freddy, Jason, and Ash are just kicking each other's asses, and there's some great action. The artwork is kind of hard to follow, and sometimes it's really over-exaggerated. Yeah, they're just like, and Linkara said this about his Nightmare on Elm Street comic review, that the artwork they used for the horror characters, namely Freddy, and it's seen in here, is that sometimes it gets a little too over-exaggerated. Like, there's like everything and nothing to look at, if that makes any sense. So, but the artwork, while it also sometimes it gets a little too cartoony, but I think they use that kind of form in the right moments. Anyway, so this comic is just tons and tons of fun. I can't recommend this to younger viewers, because not only is it, I cannot in good conscience recommend this for a younger audience, but there is a lot of blood and swearing, tons of blood, and a lot of swearing. And, this is an R-rated comic. This is a very, this does follow the tradition of just horror, blood, sex, and like I said, every other character, if your name is not Ash, you're not going to care about them, like at all, because, let's face it, the other teens in this comic are just here for cannon fodder. You know it, I know it, and that's all, and that's all we really need, is someone, people for Freddy and Jason to kill, and Ash horribly try to protect. But yeah, this does take place, if you're wondering, this does take place for Ash, long after the events of Army of Darkness, and he's trying to put it all behind him, but now he's being forced into battling Freddy and Jason, who he is just like, I cannot believe I'm doing this shit again. He is basically like, I cannot believe I am doing this again. Anyway, so again, if you're a fan of course, all of these, if you're a fan of all of these horror icons, then what more do I need to say? Go out and read this comic. It's amazing. If you're a fan of this, I'd say this is truly a find for you, for true horror fans who really wanted a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason. And again, I will openly admit that Freddy vs. Jason is not a great film, but is definitely a fun film. It is certainly just loads and loads and loads of just hysterical fun, and I love it. Also, again, having Jason Ritter in the film just kind of accentuates it, being the Gravity Falls fan trash that I am. So there you go, guys. There is, I guess you could say, my re-review of Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash. If you've read it, comment below, let me know, and yeah. Once again, hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later.